You're listening to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast, episode 104. Welcome to the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Paula Price, lawyer turned certified executive coach. This podcast was created to empower women lawyers just like you to create a life and practice you love. Join me every week for a break from the hustle so we can focus on you, what you truly want, and how you can create it. If you're over the overwhelm, done with putting out fires, and ready to redefine success on your own terms, you're in the right place. Ready for today's episode? Let's dive in. Hello, my friend. Welcome back to the podcast. It's Paula here, and I'm delighted to have you join me here this week. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. If you're a job seeker, welcome. You are in the right place. Today's podcast episode is all about networking in a job-seeking context. So if you are in that zone at this point in time, this will be highly relevant. Now, even if you're not looking for a job at this present moment, what I would invite you to think about is how this concept applies to you throughout your career. Because even though networking is a critical part of looking and finding a new job, it's also a critical part of your overall professional development. And much like you don't want to wait for a rainy day to start fixing the leak in your roof, you don't necessarily want to wait until you need a job until you start the process of networking. So if you happen to be looking for a job already, no worries. I'm going to help you out. And if you are not looking for a job, but you're looking at ways to build your network in the meantime, then you are also in the right place. So welcome. Now, before we dive into today's topic, I did want to give you an update in terms of what's going on in my practice. And I have been doing a group program for a group of 8 women lawyers. It's a group coaching and mastermind program. We started in January and we're wrapping up at the end of June. We had one of our calls this morning. We had a discussion about boundaries, which was probably one of my favorite conversations of all time. I thoroughly enjoyed preparing for this discussion about boundaries. I know it's a topic that is on my mind, particularly lately, and I know it's on the mind of our group. I know that because of the feedback, particularly the nonverbal feedback I was getting from them during today's call. And if you've ever been in a Zoom meeting, and my guess is that at this point you have been, then you know that when the topic resonates, there's a lot of head nodding. And in today's call, there was a lot of head nodding. And I felt really good about being able to have this platform for discussing boundaries and some of the challenges that come up around boundaries, different ways of thinking about boundaries. And so it was just so fun. It was so satisfying. And what I'd invite you to think about is if you are a woman lawyer and you are looking for additional support, you are looking for a program where you can be surrounded by like-minded professionals and focus on a professional goal that you have for your practice, I would invite you to reach out to me and let me know, because in July, I would like to offer this program again. It's a 6-month program. There's a theme for each month, and I will be sharing more information about that as we go forward. But if it's something that resonates with you, then absolutely let me know, because then you will be the first to know about the openings for this particular program. So with that, my dear, dear friend, we're going to dive into today's topic, which of course is networking for job seekers. Now, I'm very delighted to be offering this podcast today for it to be present on the Ethernet from now until whenever do they ever shut these things down? Who knows? But I'm excited to talk about it because it is a topic that comes up quite often. I have been asked to speak about networking. Most recently, I was asked to speak at a law school about networking for law students, and that was a wonderful conversation. I'm also asked in my one-on-one coaching sessions with lawyers who are looking for jobs how to go about the networking process. And so what I've decided to do here today is give you some guidance, because if you're a job seeker, then you may be wondering how best to approach your networking strategy, and you may not know where to turn. So you can turn to me. I will help you out and hopefully point you in a direction that resonates with you and that allows you to reach your job seeking goals. Now, the reason why I think networking can be a problem, what I've been told in coaching conversations, is that lawyers don't necessarily want to do the networking because they feel like they would be burdening other people. They don't necessarily know where to start. They don't know what to say. They don't know how to reach out. And quite often, they carry a negative connotation of what networking actually means. So I'd invite you to think about what comes to mind for you when I use the word networking. And maybe what comes to mind for you is something very positive. It's an opportunity to connect with others and learn of opportunities and share your skills and your dreams and your aspirations. Or maybe you hear the word networking and it's that cringy, I don't want to do that. That sounds gross. I'm going to have to bring business cards and I'm going to have superficial conversations and shake hands with a bunch of people that I've never met before. It's going to be awkward. So you can tell me, or tell yourself what it is that comes to mind when you think of networking, and then think about how that influences the actions that you take from there. Now, the reason why I think it is important to focus on networking is, number one, I think it is the most effective way for you to find opportunities. There are a number of steps that job seekers typically take. Usually they dust up their CV, they go and write cover letters, they look on online forums and see where they can post their jobs. They reach out to law firms and send cold email applications. There's a whole bunch of different steps that people take when it comes to finding jobs. And of all of the steps that I see lawyers take, the one that I think sets candidates apart, the ones who get jobs faster and the ones who typically find jobs that are best aligned with their interests, are the ones who go through the networking process. This is just what I have observed. Everything that I share in my podcast, of course, is my experience, my views, my opinions. And so you may disagree. You may know others who have found way more success through different channels, and that is absolutely fine. But what I am offering today is that I think networking is probably your highest leverage tool for finding a job. So why is networking important? Well, obviously to get a job. That might be the short run goal that you have for your networking. What I would also offer to you, though, is that networking is important for other reasons. If you struggle to network, if you have a lot of resistance, a lot of reluctance, you don't want to do it, you think you'll be a burden, you think you'll bug the other person, you don't know what to say, I would offer to you to consider where those objections, that reluctance shows up in other parts of your life and in particularly in your professional work. So you might find, for example, that you've had previous positions where you've had challenges, and have those challenges been related to a reluctance to develop an internal market for your work where you were? This can sometimes come up, and sometimes it's related to your willingness to start with the initiative to reach out to people, the initiative to effectively market yourself internally and externally. It may be a reluctance to take on risk, to take on bigger projects. And so I would invite you, as we go through today's episode, to reflect on that. If you feel reluctance when it comes to networking, are there other areas where you may also feel reluctant? And is that holding you back? In which case, mastering or developing greater proficiency in the art of networking may also help you develop other skills that will help you succeed in your current or future employment. Another reason why networking matters is that to the extent that you are able to build a professional network, you have additional resources. You have colleagues with whom you can speak with about your challenges that you're having at work, opportunities that you have or opportunities that they have. You'll have colleagues with whom you can develop professionally, whether it's sharing opportunities, whether it's sharing learning, whether it's sharing news of conferences or developments in the law. You'll have an expanded network. You'll have mentors, informal and formal mentors that you can reach out to. You will become a mentor, informal and formal, to others. And the more you expand your network, the greater this collection of wonderful human beings will become. And if you're networking, if you're intentional about it, you get to have a certain level of discretion and choice over who you include in your network. And you can imagine what an incredible group of people you will assemble when you make it part of your practice to expand your professional relationships. another reason that networking is important is, yes, we may be focused right now on a particular job, your next job. And as you build your professional network and you become privy to opportunities that are out there, then what will happen is you'll have a greater sense of connection and community and confidence. So if what you find is that you're in a particular role where you aren't being given the opportunities that you would like, that things aren't working out the way that you hoped that they would, that maybe you're ready to move on, you now have a network, a ready-made network. You don't have to go and start from scratch. You have a ready-made network of individuals who you can turn to, which gives you potential access to other opportunities and may also increase your bargaining power in relation to the job that you currently have. So these are all a number of reasons why networking is important, why it is fruitful, why it is beneficial, whether you are looking at networking for the purposes of finding a job in the short term, or if you're looking for greater professional fulfillment and connection over the longer term. Now, if you are a job seeker and you find that you are currently expending a lot of energy and not getting a lot in return, you may feel very frustrated. You may feel very alone. You may feel like this is hopeless. And if you are in the position of seeking a job and it is a challenging process, my heart goes out to you. I am here to support you. And I think that what we talk about today will hopefully resonate with you and provide some additional tools that you can put into your toolbox when it comes to seeking out and finding opportunities. Now, what can happen in a job search is that you spend a lot of time doing action-oriented things. However, what you may not be doing are the things that will put you face to face or keyboard to keyboard with real live humans who can get to know you and who can help you. So what you may find is that you are responding to job postings, you're seeking out job postings, you're emailing your CV off to the talent directors at organizations and law firms, wherever you can find them. But what you're not doing is having one-to-one conversations with lawyers and others who are in the industry who can get to know you, who can tell you about their particular career paths, who can tell you of any opportunities that they may know about, and who can put your name forward to others who may be looking for talent. Now, the reason that it may not necessarily work to go through these channels, of course, job postings are there and they're great. And yes, I invite you to certainly look at job postings, and not just for the jobs themselves. Yes, it's great to look at job postings and to apply for them if you're interested. But I think what's also wonderful about job postings is to learn what you're actually interested in. So if you can imagine reading a job posting, I know I've had this experience. My guess is you've had it too. And there's a bullet point of all the different duties that are involved in that particular job. My guess is that some of those bullet points will jump out at you off the page. It's as though they're written in bold or they're highlighted. Even though they're the same font and they're not highlighted, there's something about the job description that leaps out at you. And I invite you to pay attention, because that is really useful data to have about yourself and where you might find yourself experiencing great satisfaction through your work. So yes, I want you to apply for jobs if they look interesting. But if you're limiting yourself to the jobs that are posted, you're missing out on a lot of opportunities. Now, what I've seen happen in terms of the way that a job is created, the job typically stems from a need. There's an organization, whether it's a law firm, whether it's government, whether it's some other organization, and they realize they have a gap that they need to fill. They have a problem that they need to solve, and they need a human, a talented, amazing human just like you to come and help them out. And so what will typically happen is they'll run through their existing organization. Is there anybody internal that might fill this position? They'll look at their immediate contacts. Do we know anybody who could fit that bill? They might ask their contacts about their contacts. And if they can't find anybody, then somebody will be tasked with the job of writing out a job description. And so they will sit down and they will write out those magical bullet points that may have jumped off the page at you. And they're really taking their best guess at what the job could possibly look like. So they're creating a job description. Then they go and post it. And what happens then is that that posting becomes available for the world to see. It's now online. Lots of applicants will line up, put their names in for that job. There will be an interview process and somebody eventually will get hired. Sometimes recruiters are involved in that process. And so if you're a job seeker and you're waiting for that job posting, number one, a lot of jobs will never see the light of day. A lot of jobs will never be beautifully summarized in a job description posted online, nor will there be a list of applicants or a number of applicants who apply for that job. So a number of jobs, number one, are not being captured by that process. And then the second part of that is once a job is posted, then all the job seekers see that same job, and there are a number of people applying for the same position. And so there's greater competition for the jobs that are out there. So you can see you don't have to be super great at math to realize that there's a smaller supply relative to jobs that may also exist and a greater demand. So if that's your main strategy, you may find success, and many lawyers will find success. However, you're also missing out on other channels through which you may find your next job. So, yes, you can see where this is going. I'm inviting you to consider networking as a way to get in front of people. This is a way to meet lawyers, to meet talent management professionals, to meet individuals who may know of opportunities that already exist, or who may in the future learn about opportunities that exist. And because they know you and they met you and they like you and they know what you have to offer, it's easy for them to then say, hey, I was just chatting with my friend over here at Smith's law firm. They said they're looking for a third-year litigation associate. I just met that really great associate who's looking for a job. I should put them in contact with each other. So you can see how that works. And in the meantime, all those people that you meet along the way become part of your professional network. So maybe they do not present with a job that you'll take immediately, but they now know of you. And so when you meet them at future networking events, as you meet them at industry events, maybe you see them speak at a CLE or they see you speak at a CLE, you are now in each other's orbits. And so you have the basis for a longer standing professional relationship. And I can say that when I have gone through the job searching process, I have met individuals, I have added them to my so-called network, and many of them continue to be my professional colleagues to this day. So for me, it's been 20 plus years. For you, depending on where you are in your legal career, that might seem like a short amount of time. It might seem like a really long amount of time. But all the efforts that you make, all the initiative that you take to expand your professional network is an investment for the long term. So now you're probably desperate to hang up on this podcast, to hit the stop button and jump straight into networking. And if that's the case, go ahead. And if you are really keen to network, but you want some ideas, some tips and tricks and strategies and things to think about, stay tuned, because I'm about to offer some of those to you right now. I've got 5 suggestions to help you in the networking process. The first suggestion is to see networking as a skill and a practice, something that you do over time continually, and not something that you reserve for the day that you need to have a network because you need a job. Now, if you are currently looking for a job and you don't have that network, I don't want to discourage you. This is absolutely the right time for you to get started. Don't let this be taken as a criticism or as a suggestion that you should have started sooner. You are where you are. And so let's start where you are and move forward from here. What I'm trying to illustrate here is that your professional career is an ongoing work of art, and you get to design and create it. So as you go through your work, as you meet other lawyers on files, as you meet lawyers at professional networking events, as you meet with your clients, as you meet professionals who are outside of the legal industry, as you meet people that you just like, I encourage you to think about how you are growing your network continually. Again, going back to the example of the leaky roof, you don't want to wait for the day where there's a huge thunderstorm and the rain is seeping through the holes in your roof and you've got buckets lined up to catch the drips and you're out on the roof and you can't see what you're doing because the rain is so heavy and the wind is so strong and you're about to fall off, etc. No, we don't want to be there. What we want to do is pick a nice, clear, sunny day, patch up the roof where it's super low stress. Maybe you have some iced tea while you're up there because it's just that nice. that's what we want to be aiming toward, so that when you do have that rainy day, you don't need to rebuild the roof from scratch. You can simply turn to your existing network and let them know that you are looking for something new. So that is suggestion number 1, is to look at networking as something that you do on a continuous basis. Now, suggestion number 2, I think will be really helpful if suggestion number 1 made you cringe. If you think about networking and it makes your skin crawl and you think, oh gosh, Paula, have you just actually suggested that I spend my lifetime, my career, the next 20, 30, 40 years of my life networking, schmoozing, small talking, switching business cards, reaching out on LinkedIn with some cheesy message? If that's what came to mind for you, then step 2 or suggestion number 2 will definitely resonate. And that is, if the word networking brings up negative connotations for you, then I would invite you to rethink the way that you are looking at networking. Now, this may mean that you no longer use the word networking. I actually rarely use the word networking. I use it for this podcast because that way you can find me, because you're going to think, okay, I have to network for my job. This is going to be terrible. And so you can see the word network and that might draw you here. But when it comes to my own professional network, I prefer words like connection or relationships. If I look at what drives me professionally and outside of my professional work, some of my core values are relationships and building connections. Relationships with individuals in my life, whether they're professional relationships, personal relationships, my family, the relationship that I have with myself, all those are really important to me. I also highly value connection. I value the connection that I form with other individuals. I value being able to connect individuals with each other where I see they have things in common. And I value the ability to connect ideas. Sometimes it's connecting ideas with each other. Sometimes it's connecting people with ideas. That's what I'm doing through this podcast. I'm taking ideas and I'm taking people and I'm connecting you. I'm also sometimes connecting people with other people through this podcast. So you can see how connection and relationship resonate with me. I can get behind those words and feel really, really good about them. So when it comes time to take the steps to go out and meet people and do what is effectively networking, I don't see it as networking. I don't see it as some cheesy thing that I have to do in order to grow my brand or do something like that. No, I look at this as an opportunity to form relationships with individuals who I really like, admire, respect, who I want to learn more about, people with whom we have common interests. We want to advance the same things. And I can tell you that through this approach to networking, again, I'm using air quotes because it's not really the language I would first gravitate to, I have managed to meet some of the most incredible, amazing professionals, and I feel really good about it. So this podcast isn't really about me, but I thought, hey, I'm an example of this. I truly, truly am. And so how would this resonate with you? What values can you attach yourself to that align with what networking really involves, but in a way that actually aligns and feels good to you? So that is step 2, is if you need it, a radical overhaul and reframe the way that you conceive of networking. Now, suggestion number 3 is to learn to see yourself as someone who is there to provide value. One of the biggest objections that I hear when it comes to networking is, I don't want to inconvenience somebody. I don't want to come across as needy. I don't want to interrupt them, waste time in their day. You can hear the examples and you can probably relate at some point or another to having felt this way. Now, the reality is, if you are reaching out and networking among people that you've never met before, chances are there's not a lot that you can necessarily offer to these people. Now, if you think about a pure interview, an interview that has been set up because there is an existing job opening, there is a problem that needs to be solved, and the purpose of the interview is to find a person to solve that problem, you can see how the value proposition is fairly immediate. We have a problem, organization, we have a problem, we have a hole to fix, and we think you, the applicant, you are the person who can help us solve it. So you can see the value proposition there. Now, if you're out there doing informational interviews, if you're asking your network to introduce you to others so that you can learn about them and learn about potential opportunities and share a little bit about yourself, you can see how that person may have nothing to gain from this interaction. They may have a sense of loyalty to a mutual connection, and so they're doing the meeting as a favor to that person. They may feel a sense of loyalty and duty to the legal profession at large, and they see meeting with you as part of their commitment to helping advance the profession and the members of the profession. They may do it out of curiosity. They may do it because they think that at some point down the road, maybe they will need somebody. But you can see how the person who you're meeting with may or may not have a need that you are able to fill. And so what I offer to you is that you are going to want to make the most of that engagement, the most of that interaction. If you're going into that interaction with the belief that you're needy, that you're imposing, that you're taking away from their precious schedule, and you're not showing up in a way that focuses on them and how you can potentially provide value to them, then you may end up self-sabotaging and not putting your best self forward in that interaction. So instead of focusing on what a drain this could potentially be to the person who you're meeting, I invite you to think about how you can show up in a place of service to that person. And it may be that service is simply giving that person an opportunity to share about themselves. If you have ever been an interviewer and the interviewee has turned to you and asked you a question like, what is it that you love about your job? Or maybe they have asked you a question like, wow, you have such an amazing career. How did you get to the place that you are now? And those questions have invited you to go down a trip down your own memory lane. Well, I have this position because I worked really hard at the beginning. I saw right from the get-go that I was absolutely fascinated by litigation. I wanted to get all the courtroom experience I possibly could. So I took every role, every opportunity, every case, and I lost a million cases, but I finally found my groove and now here I am. And whatever that story looks like, I'm obviously making it up, or maybe not obviously, but I'm making up that story. But you can see how the person who's answering those questions, by reliving some of the successes and challenges that they've overcome in their journey to getting to where they are, that is actually a very pleasurable experience for that person because it's reminding them of some of the amazing things about their own professional work. And the fact that you're recognizing that in them in itself is a form of service. Maybe you see that that person that you're meeting with is really passionate about a particular area of law, and so are you. You may be able to go into that conversation offering something of value. Maybe it's a resource that that person didn't necessarily know about. Maybe it's an engaging conversation that invites them to think about a topic in a new light. So going back to this point, suggestion number 3, which is to learn to see yourself as providing value, I'm inviting you to go into these conversations, whether it's an interview, in which case it's probably fairly clear what it is that you have to offer, or if it's an informational interview or a coffee chat where maybe the value proposition isn't quite as clear, is to go into that experience with a view to serving that person. So the 4th suggestion that I have is to be strategic yet flexible. So strategic probably is pretty self-explanatory when it comes to a job search and figuring out how you want to network. So a couple of ideas. Number 1 is you want to gain clarity over what it is that you're looking for. Now, this is a lot easier to say than it is to actually do. You may have clarity over elements of what you want in a job, and yet you may not have clarity about what that job specifically looks like. So I'd invite you to think about what it is that you're looking for, whether you can pin down that you want a collegial work environment, you want a litigation-focused environment, you want a corporate commercial environment, you want to do real estate, you want to work for a nonprofit, you want to work in the legal education space. You get to decide what are some of the things that you know about the job that you're seeking and make a list of what those things are. Now, I would also invite you to make a list of all of the people that you want to meet. Now, this is a very important exercise. I love lists. If you listen to this podcast regularly, then you've probably heard me talk about lists. I love writing them. I have lists that I write every single day. I love especially checking off items on my list. Sometimes I write my to-do list and I cheat a little bit. I put a couple of bullet points in there that I've already done just so I can check them off. And you want to do the same when it comes to networking. Now, I think my last major list making episode was probably in 2017 when I was transitioning from practice to coaching. And I remember going online and finding every single lawyer coach that existed at the time. And I printed up their bios and I figured out what they were doing. And I had a list. I had a list of lawyers that I wanted to reach out to, lawyer coaches that I wanted to reach out to. And then I went through that list. And what's so interesting is I actually found one of those lists recently and realized that there were a number of these names on the list that I'd reached out to at the time. But what was even more surprising is how over the course of the last, 5 years, I've actually ended up meeting a lot more people on my list than I had initially met, which is quite fun and quite remarkable. Now, going back to you and your list, make that list. Think of all the people that you can identify, and then you're going to want to reach out to them. And you can reach out on LinkedIn. You can reach out by email. You can do phone calls. Personally, I prefer a warning. I don't like receiving random phone calls because I'm typically not prepared for them, and my days are scheduled in such a way that I typically don't have time if someone calls in the middle of the day to have a lengthy conversation. So my preference is to reach out with a note. Now, when you do a note, I would invite you to be thoughtful about how you want to write your note. I get a lot of emails, a lot of messages on LinkedIn that are clearly form emails. I do not like them. I typically will not respond to them. I feel like I'm being marketed to, and it doesn't feel genuine. And so I will ignore them. And chances are, if you're writing that type of email to others, they may ignore you as well. So think about how you can write a note that somebody will want to respond to. Now, an example of a note that got a response from my end was, for example, there was a lawyer that I wanted to meet. This was a few years back when I was looking at a particular practice area. And so I found this really neat article that a lawyer had written. And even though the article was several years old, I wrote to the lawyer and I said, "Hey, I just read your article about creating this type of practice. I'm really interested in learning more. Would you be interested in meeting for coffee?" And it turns out that that lawyer was interested in meeting for coffee. In fact, they invited me to lunch and they invited me actually to take them out to lunch. I said, sure, why not? And so we went out to lunch. I had a chance to meet with them. It was great. So I invite you to think about when you approach somebody on LinkedIn, by email, however you want to do that you do it in such a way that is natural, that doesn't come off as a form letter, and that invites that person to want to respond, that you show that there's some sort of a connection, whether it's you being connected to some aspect of their work, something that they've said, something that they've written, a particular practice area that they're in. And so you want that reaching out message to be friendly, interesting, and something that they want to respond to. And another tip on that score, please keep it short. I think emails that are very long are really hard to respond to. So yes, I am totally biased against long emails. I realize sometimes you need to send long emails, but this is not a situation that requires a long email. Short and sweet is better with a distinct invitation so that the person can say yes or no very easily. If you put too many roadblocks up for that person, it will get harder. So where were we? We were talking about being strategic. So yes, make a list of what interests you, make a list of the people that you want to reach out to, and for those people, figure out what mutual interests you have with them, how to establish a connection with them. You want to be strategic, but you also want to be flexible. So that means that yes, you'll have your list of people that you want to reach out to, but also be open-minded in various situations, because you might find that the person who is going to refer you to the person who ultimately has a job for you is the person that you regularly see at the gym. It might be that you have a friend in common who you meet at a party. I can think of a party I went to. It was one of my daughter's, not her birthday party, but one of her daycare birthday parties. This is a few years ago. And I was anticipating that I would meet a particular mom in that group who I knew to be a freelance lawyer, which is what I was interested in doing at the time. And I did meet with her and it was lovely. But what I didn't expect was that I would meet another mom who was very interested in building an online business. And as it turns out, between the two, she and I ended up having a lot more in common, and we went on to have a lovely relationship. And as it turns out, my relationship with her, which is both personal and professional, had more of an impact on my professional work than the relationship that I formed with the lawyer. So it's kind of interesting just to see how sometimes what you expect or who you expect will be somebody that will have a lot in common with you, it turns out that yes, you do have something in common, but there's somebody else there where you would not ever have been able to predict that you'd have something in common, but it turns out that you do. So you want to be strategic and you want to be flexible and you want to allow yourself to follow those unexpected turns, because when you follow your interests and what really lights you up and people who spark ideas that maybe you hadn't come up with before, that's where you're really going to find the gold. You're going to find the magic that ultimately creates that truly successful career for yourself. So we've talked about that stage of trying to meet people, sort of reach out, create opportunities for those informational interviews, whether they're in person, whether you do it on Zoom. Now, what do you do when you meet that person? This is step 5, actually. Suggestion number 5 is what to do when you meet people. So my first suggestion is to come prepared to ask a lot of questions. As lawyers, you know that there are different types of questions that you can ask. You can ask open-ended questions and you can ask closed-ended questions. You would like to stay away from closed-ended questions. If you ask somebody, hey, did you like the movie? And the answer is no. That is a closed-ended question. You have now reached a bit of a wall in your conversation. Now you can recover from that. Oh, what did you not like about the movie? Now you've asked an open-ended question because the answer isn't a yes or no. It's, well, I didn't like the movie because, and then you'll hear the story. So what you want to do is come prepared with a list of questions, preferably open-ended questions. Questions such as, what inspired you to do the work that you do? What do you find most interesting about your job? What do you find most challenging about your job? What recommendations would you have to someone who's just starting out? These are examples of open-ended questions that you could ask. That's step number 1. When you go to meet somebody, I would encourage you to do the work for them. So instead of saying, oh, I'd love to go for coffee, where do you want to go? How about you figure out where they're located and look up coffee shops that are near their office and say, hey, I see you're near this coffee shop and that coffee shop. Would you like to meet at either of those ones? So now you've made it a little bit easier for that person to make a decision. If you're meeting online, then I would encourage you to be the one to send the Zoom link, unless maybe they have an account with Zoom and you don't, in which case that's fine if they send you the link. If it's a phone call, maybe you ask them for a phone number where you can reach them. You want to make it as easy as possible for that person. If anyone's sending a calendar invitation, it should be you as the person who's reaching out to connect with them. Now, when you are speaking with that person, I also encourage you to be as gracious as possible. Now, I would not mention this, except I've had this happen to me. And so I just want to save anybody from doing this, maybe not realizing how it comes across. I once had an informational interview with somebody who I met with as a favor to a mutual acquaintance. And when I got on the phone with this person, they said, I don't know who you are. How can you help me? So-and-so said I should talk to you. How can you help me? And I can share with you that this was not the ideal way for this person to start the conversation with me, because I was speaking with this person as a favor to somebody else. I was not expecting to be asked, I've never heard of you. How can you help me? And it came across as rude. So I know that you would never want that to be how you come across in the opening of a conversation with somebody. They are meeting you potentially as a courtesy. This is an informational interview. I would encourage you to come prepared. Oh, we have a mutual friend in common. They shared with me that you are a litigator, that you've had a number of really big trials lately. I'd love to learn more about you. I'd love to learn more about the work that you do. Something like that versus, I don't know why Susie set us up. Can you tell me, what was going on in her mind? That's what I'm talking about. So you want to be gracious. Another kind of pet peeve that I have, which may or may not apply to others, is I've had interactions, one in particular that I'm thinking about, where someone reached out to me on LinkedIn. I had an informational interview with them, and then they said, listen, I'm going to send you my CV, and if you know of anybody, can you please send it to them? And I said, I really don't know of anybody who I could send that to, so I prefer that you didn't send me your CV. And instead of not sending me their CV, they actually did go ahead and send me their CV. And I thought, that's kind of weird because I asked you not to. And so if somebody explicitly says, please don't send me your materials, I have nowhere to send them, please don't send your materials, because then that person may feel the way that I felt, which is, oh, great, now I've got all these materials and I feel like I need to send them to somebody, but I have nobody to send them to. And I feel somehow like I'm deficient. Versus if you simply don't do that, if you say, thank you, this conversation has been really helpful. Now you've shared with me all this information. That was really great. I appreciate your time. That's one way to end the conversation. Or if the person says, hey, listen, would you please send me your materials, because I don't know of any opportunities, but if I hear something, I'd really love to put your name forward. That's a very different conversation, in which case absolutely go ahead and follow up on that invitation to send your materials. But please be sensitive and mindful to the person that you are speaking to. So that was a little bit of a soapbox moment. Thank you for indulging, but I really just wanted to share that with you because it has happened to me and I don't want you to make that same mistake. And finally, follow up with a thank you. I think thank you notes are lovely. It doesn't have to be long, something short, sweet. Thanks for your time. Really appreciated speaking with you. I'll keep you posted as things unfold, or if you ever need anything, let me know. That's the kind of way that you want to leave off. You want to leave off on a good note. So this is, again, we're talking about how to prepare for what to do when you meet the person. We've just talked about asking them questions, being courteous, following up with a thank you. Now, another thing I recommend doing is to think about what you want to share in that conversation. So first of all, you want to ask a lot of questions. You don't want to show up and start marketing yourself. Well, I'm really great because I was my, top 10% of law students in my class, and I've done all this pro bono work and I ran all these trials. That's potentially really useful information, but you don't want that to be the starting point. You want to start out by showing a genuine interest in the person who has agreed to meet you. At some point, the conversation will very likely turn to you. Oh, we've been talking about me, but I really want to know what you're all about. Can you tell me about yourself? That's when you want to have the equivalent of sound bites. Now, you've probably heard people talk about your elevator pitch. What's your 30-second or 3-second description of who you are, what you do, and how you can help them? And for some people, that works. I think it's okay. It's not something that I necessarily place a huge amount of importance on. What I think is important is to be able to articulate what it is that you want to articulate, what is important for that particular conversation. So it may be that the sound bites are what you do. You're a litigator, you're a certain level of call, you have a book of business, you don't have a book of business, you're looking for opportunities, you're not looking for opportunities, you would love to be in a large firm environment, you want access to mentorship. Think about what is important to you. What is it that you would really love to share with that person? How can you support them? How would you be of service to them? So think about what those sound bites are and have them ready to go so that when the questions come your way, which inevitably they will, you have answers that you can offer. Now, if you're looking for a job, but you don't know quite what it is that you want, then I wouldn't let yourself be held back by the container. I think a lot of different job postings, descriptions, titles could encapsulate a lot of the similar skills or the nature of the work. So what I would invite you to focus on there is to figure out what the themes are versus specific titles or roles that you might do. And that allows you to have consistency. So you might be talking to a bunch of different lawyers. Maybe they're big firm lawyers, small firm lawyers, government lawyers. And you might think, well, gosh, there's nothing in common between any of these people. And yet there might be something in common that you want to be working on files that get you engaged with issues that relate to public interest. It may be that you want to work in an environment where it's a team atmosphere. It may be that you want to be involved in mentorship, both receiving and providing mentorship. It may be that you want to be working on trials where you get to go to court yourself. It may be that you want to be on commercial deals where you're working as part of a team. So what I'd invite you to think about are the characteristics of what you want that job to encapsulate and focus less on the title or the package in which it might appear. And then finally, when you are doing the speaking, I invite you to approach the conversation from a very positive perspective. So you already know this. We don't want to be saying negative things about previous employers. Instead, focus on the positive and what you want going forward. And finally, I encourage you to have fun. So if you have a good sense of humor, if you're great at telling stories, if you're great at asking questions, Use your social skills to brighten that person's day. People will forget what you said. They will not forget how you made them feel. So, to recap, I've offered 5 suggestions when it comes to networking, and good for you. We are well into this podcast. I'm looking at the time. It's been 45 minutes, my friend. So you are powering through. Number 1, see networking as a life skill and a practice, not just something that you reserve for job searches. Number 2, reframe any negative connotations you may have with the word networking and use a different word if you need to. Number 3 is to learn how to see yourself as providing value and consider what value you can bring to the conversations that you're having. Number 4 is to be strategic in the way that you approach networking, yet remain flexible. And number 5 is what to do when you meet people. Now, if you do all these things, if you network and continue to network, it may not be an easy process, but what you will accomplish is you'll develop the skill of connecting with people. You'll develop the skill of initiating discussions with people. You'll learn how to lead a conversation. You'll learn what it feels like to be in the driver's seat instead of being reactionary. So if you can imagine you're in your job search and you're just waiting for jobs to appear on a screen so you can apply for them, versus getting out there and learning about opportunities and being that person who discovers, hey, wait a second, maybe this person that I'm speaking to right here doesn't have an opportunity, but they just spoke with their friend over at that firm where they're looking for that 3rd-year real estate associate. And hey, that just happens to be exactly what I'm looking for. So again, you want to put yourself in that proactive versus reactive state. You'll build your confidence. As you do more of this, you'll increasingly develop that skill of being able to navigate these challenges, to overcome the resistance that you might feel, to gain confidence in yourself. And perhaps best of all, you'll become a person with a network. What is required of you really is willingness. It's a willingness to take the initiative to reach out to people. It's a willingness to be rejected because not everybody is going to say yes. And it's a willingness to be ignored, which frankly is probably the more likely thing to happen is you send out an invitation and you don't receive a response. It also requires a willingness for you to prepare for informational interviews. It requires that you research people and find out who you want to speak with. It requires that you prepare questions and ask them. It requires that you show up. And believe me, if you've been, I say this from experience, if you've been doing a large part of your work from the comfort of your home and all of a sudden you have to put on really uncomfortable shoes and suit pants and take transit or drive somewhere so that you can meet somebody, chances are you're not going to want to leave the house. So you're going to overcome that resistance and you're going to do it anyways. And you're going to be so glad. It also requires that you be awkward. And anytime that you do something for the first time, something you haven't done in a while, if you're networking, I can guarantee you'll have some awkward conversations. I can think back on conversations that I have had that are 100% cringeworthy. I look back on them and I think, ooh, Paula, what were you thinking? But I know what I was thinking. I was thinking to the best of my ability at that particular time. I didn't have the benefit of having listened to myself on this podcast about what to do to prepare. The biggest regret that I have in terms of networking is starting with me, trying to convey that I had value to offer. I think the better approach, frankly, is what I described here, is to ask questions and simply to respond when somebody else asks questions. So that's my takeaway tip for anybody who's grappling with how do you approach that conversation? Do I talk about things that I can do for them or do I let them ask me first? My vote would be for the latter. But yes, you will have awkward conversations. Maybe it's going to be some other form of awkwardness. And finally, the greatest willingness of all, the willingness to keep going until you find what you're looking for. So, my dear friend, whether you are looking for a job or if you are content in your job and you're just thinking about how to continue to expand your network, I hope that you have enjoyed today's podcast. When you do what I have suggested, or even some of the ideas that I have suggested, or your version of what I have suggested, because I recognize that what I have to share may not fully resonate with you, you will leverage the most valuable tool that you have when searching for a job and building your career, which is developing your professional network. The more people you meet, the more information you will have about the market, the more clarity you will have about what you want. Because now, instead of shopping at a store where all you can see are the posted jobs, you're actually learning about all the different lawyers and professionals that you meet with, what they do for their work, what their friends do for their work. You learn about opportunities. And so you have a much broader scope from which to assess what aspects of different types of work resonate with you. So you'll get a better idea of what you want based on what's out there. And you'll also be better able to articulate what it is that you're looking for. Because if you're talking to people, and let's say you have 3 conversations where you need to explain what you're looking for, you'll probably be better the 3rd time you explain it than you are the first time you explain it. But if you have to explain that 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, think of how great you're going to get at articulating exactly what it is that you're looking for, the value proposition that you come with. All of those skills are going to improve dramatically, and you will gain so much more clarity over what it is that you want. As you meet more people, there will be more individuals out there who can help you find what you're looking for, and vice versa. You may be the one who ultimately helps them find what they're looking for. You'll have better access to jobs that are not posted. So those jobs that are there, that they're created in the sense that there's a need, but not necessarily someone to fill that need. If and when those jobs become available, you're more likely to hear of them. And finally, when you do this work, when you have that knowledge about what the market has to offer, when you have that knowledge about what you yourself really want, the better the chances are that you will be able to find work that aligns with what you want and where you will ultimately thrive. So that, my friend, is today's podcast episode. I hope you have enjoyed it. If you are a job seeker, I wish you all success as you are out there in the world doing these informational interviews, figuring out what you want. Yes, the process sometimes can take time, and I encourage you to rely on the tool of networking, however you want to describe it, whether it's relationship building, connecting. Rely on that tool to help you move forward in your search. So with that, I'm going to wish you farewell. Wish all of you a wonderful week, and I look forward to reconnecting in the next podcast episode. Bye for now. If you enjoyed today's show and don't want to miss an episode, subscribe and follow the show wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you haven't already, please leave a rating and review. Your feedback will help me create a podcast that's tailored to your needs and goes straight to the heart of what matters to you. For instructions on how to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com/podcast launch. See you next time. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Joyful Practice for Women Lawyers podcast. If you want more information, visit www.thejoyfulpractice.com. See you next week.